Well, there we have it. Another week has come and gone. It's definitely summer, and I can tell you that by the amount of boats I'm seeing on the water. We just had the July 4th holiday this past Monday, and I think that was kind of that springboard into, whoa, here we are, right? So, and I kind of bite my tongue because I was always telling people, man, the accesses seem to be a little down this year. I mean, maybe things are getting back to normal. But nope, July 4th hit, and this entire week, especially this weekend, was a zoo. I spent a bunch of days on Minnetonka. It was packed. With that, please continue to be courteous of one another, be respectful, be the defensive driver on the water. Let's not have any accidents. Whether you're fishing, whether you're tubing, whether you're pleasure boating, just be courteous. I'm still seeing some people on the lake just blatantly cutting people off, waking boats that are 20 yards away from them. Like, just, have a little bit of common sense, and it'll go a long way. Everyone's out there trying to enjoy their time on the water, no matter how they're doing it. But again, just be respectful of one another, and we'll be just fine, and we'll have a lot of fun on the body of water that you're on. Enough with that. Let's get into the fishing of this. So I'm going to talk about some bass techniques. A lot of stuff is continuing to work very well. The jig worm, the Ned rig, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get too far into that. We have played with a few other approaches that I'll walk through that caught some fish. Just trying something different, being a little more creative. But again, if you're bass fishing in the next week, based off what I found this last week, you're gonna have a spinning rod in your hand. You're probably gonna be fishing a Ned rig or a jig worm. It's catching a lot of fish, everywhere from 14 feet to 24 feet of water. And that sounds like a broad spectrum, but it depends on the body of water you fish. If I'm on Chisago chain, if I'm on Minnetonka, if I'm in the West Metro, that weed line, that deep weed line, which tends to be the pattern right now, is relative to the body of water. So I just don't want to tell you to go out there and fish in 22 feet of water like I might be on certain bays on Minnetonka, because then you might hit a lake in the West Metro where that deep weed line's in 15 feet. 22 feet of water, you have nothing. So pay attention to your electronics, pay attention to where that deep weed line is and how the fish are relating to that, because then that'll determine the depth you're actually gonna fish. So I get asked often, how deep are you fishing? Where then I'll ask, well, where are you fishing? Where are you planning to go? Because that could be, change what I tell you in terms of depth. So with that, I want to touch on some crappies and bluegills. We did a little bit of crappie and bluegill fishing this week. We are finding them schooling up, so we're going to touch on that as well. But before we do that, we'll touch on what I'm seeing in terms of the bass world. So water temps are heating up. When I left the lake this weekend, we had 81 degrees surface temp. That is bath water. That is warm. You can feel it when you step in at the axis to launch your boat. You can feel it when you land a fish. It's warm, right? That's what we're seeing. This is going to be some of the warmest water we'll see all year. It really doesn't get much warmer than this. So with that in mind, think about how these fish could react to those warming conditions. Pick your times of day. I understand it might not always be ideal, or it might not even be an option, but if you can, get out there early in the morning, fish the first 3-4 hours of sunup, because one, the bite can be better, and two, you're not dealing with that boat traffic we just talked about. So if you can get out there when the sun comes up and fish until 10 o'clock, you're gonna thank me. You're probably gonna catch most of your fish during that window, and you're not gonna have all kinds of boats all over the lake. If you must fish middle of the day and into the afternoon, still go for it. You can't catch them from the couch, still get out there, but continue to fish deep, continue to fish slow. I cannot stress enough that when you're fishing a jig worm or a Ned rig, this contraption right here, the reel, is just there to pick up slack. You're not working a bait back to the boat with that. The rod is pulling the bait. The reel's just picking up some slack. Too many anglers are casting, they're reeling in, they're trying to work the fish, the reel. That's not what you want to do. You want to keep this bait right in the bottom, right in the strike zone. The rod is just slowly working it back to the boat, and you're picking up slack with this. And I keep sounding like a dead horse or a broken record, because my clients continue to keep doing that, and I have to keep telling them, just use the reel to pick up the slack. You're not working the bait back to the boat with the reel. And if you can just think of some of those simple tips on a jig worm or a Ned rig, you'll get more bites, I promise you. So show you some things we've been doing. Obviously the Ned ringer from Twister has been getting beat up. We've caught a ton of fish on that. That's what I've been throwing. We've been throwing various forms of jig worms, but in the last couple of days I've experimented a little more with some different approaches over some of the same structure, and we're seeing some of the same results. So I've had some people fish the Mighty Head, green pumpkin, changing it up. I'm always a chartreuse jig head guy, and we fished pocket fry, a little bit off, rig down there, kind of like a modified jig worm slash Ned rig. So I'm rigging that right on that mighty head. And there you go. Falls a little slower than that's your standard Senko or Kamita would. You can see that right there. But nice and supple. It kind of gives you a little bit of a jig worm Ned rig shaky head approach, just something different, real supple in the water. We've caught a pile of fish on that. Super fun bait to fish. And we've caught a bunch of fish in the last few days, taking a pocket craw. So a lot of times I use this pocket craw on the back of a jig as a trailer of some kind. But now I'm taking that same mighty head, I'm taking that pocket craw, and I'm threading it on there just like I would any of these plastics I'm fishing. You can see here on this mighty head, pull those tentacles. But now I'm pitching this around some of that same structure and cover. Just a different approach. It's got a little bigger profile. It's got the claws on it. I'm seeing some fish spitting up crayfish and different things. And we're pitching this small morsel. This isn't huge. I mean, you're talking this entire thing is 3 inches, 3.5 inches. So it can be fished in the exact same manner as, let's say, a Ned rig or a jig worm. It's just a different look. It's a different approach. And it's getting these fish to bite. So we're fishing that pocket fry, and then we're fishing this pocket craw and catching quite a few bass on it, and even going back through some of these spots where we threw a jig worm, we threw a Ned rig at them, people are pulling this across the bottom again. Same profile, same action, same approach, where it's on the bottom, rod's doing the work, reel's picking up the slack, and they're eating that pocket craw. So just maybe something a little outside the box, maybe change it up. If you get a little stagnant or you start to stall out, you know, a little complacent with maybe your technique, just throw a different plastic on there. Come through the same spots with just a different look. Same thing with the drop shot. A lot of people are fishing drop shots in these same areas, and we play with it quite a bit too and caught plenty of fish. So just continue to have those arsenals, those different things in your arsenal to try and play with. And you might be shocked on some days. We just need a little bit of reset up here to start catching more fish. So that's been good. And again, we're fishing that immediate weed line, paying attention to your electronics. You know, and a lot of anglers, I think, oftentimes are too shallow. If you're just snagging up nonstop, I mean, I'm talking like hard weed snags, like even hard to rip through it, back off. I promise you're gonna wanna just back off a bit. The fish are gonna be there, they're gonna be in that little deeper zone. You will find weeds on some of these lakes this time of year, way deeper than you think. And if there's weeds down there, there can be bait fish and there can be game fish. So just keep that in mind. Now, panfish. We've got a bunch of bluegills, a bunch of crappies. They're becoming relatively easy to catch. They're schooled up heavily. You can see the big balls of bait fish, meaning bluegills and crappies, on your electronics, and they are actively feeding. You can cast into them and you can catch fish. So if you want to try your hand at crappies and bluegills, it's not a hard time of year to catch them. It's pretty good, so it's super exciting. So what we're doing to find these fish is I'm paying attention to my electronics. When I'm seeing all these fish on it, I'm either one, casting through them with like a 3/32 ounce Clam Outdoors drop TG. So this is a tungsten round ball jig head, and I'm fishing a Mr. Twister Sassy Sting 'em on the back. Just a small 1.5 to 2 inch profile bait, and I can pitch this right into where these fish are, and I can work it back through where the school is, and it's super effective. So I can be in control, I can fan cast, and I can locate some of these fish. And if they continue to eat this bait, this will be what I use to catch bluegills and crappies. I won't mess with anything else. This is the most efficient way to do it. Cast, set the hook, reel in, do it again. So, and I'm fishing this on a 7-foot light action Thorne Brothers custom rod. I got a 1000 series Shimano, and I got 5-pound test copolymer monofilament line. Pretty basic setup to catch bluegills and crappies. Biggest thing is finding the fish, finding where they're at, paying attention to where they're sitting, and casting into them. They are eating, and they're eating fairly aggressively. And most of these fish are going to be on your deep weed lines. So when I'm doing the bass thing, I'm seeing them on my electronics. So I can see that they're out there and I'm fishing for them. Now another approach, if you need to do a little longer cast, well, let's say you have a little bit of wind, or you may have to go down into the weeds. Similar approach, except for I go to a braided main line, like a 10-pound or 8-pound, like, I don't know, like a Berkeley Nano Fill or something to that effect. And then I put my 5-pound fluorocarbon leader on the end, and I'm fishing that same 1/32 ounce, or I might go up to a 1/16 ounce drop TG jig head with my favorite plastic. But this braided line, same rod, 7-foot light action, 1000 series Shimano, has no stretch. So I can feel it better, I can pop it through the weeds. You're not really popping a lot of baits through the weeds with a 7-foot light action rod and 5-pound monofilament. It just kind of loads up and you end up having to reel at the whole thing back, pull the weeds off and cast again. But with the braid, I can pop it through there and continue to fish. So depending on the situation, I kind of got a 1-2 punch fan cast approach to catching these bluegills and crappies, and it works. Now, what I had some of the kids in my boat doing, and adults, this week was implementing a slip float. So a lot of these fish in even 20 feet of water are 5, 6, 7 feet down. That's where they're at. They're not necessarily way down there in the bottom. They're high in the water column. So I got slip bobbers set up. You can see the slip knots way up here. That's about 6, 7 feet down. And you're fishing your favorite jig in plastic, and I'm using a slip bobber to where they can cast this out where that school of panfish is and just watch a bobber do its thing. It can go down about 7 feet. It's in the strike zone. And they can set the hook home. Again, same thing, I'm using the 5-pound test line. You got your light action rod, your 1000 series Shimano reel, and just a slip float, just a different approach. So between that two styles, the fan cast and the slip float, you can be very dangerous and put a bunch of panfish in the boat right now, and it's a whole lot of fun. So we caught a lot of pike as well in the weed lines. They're snapping. If you want to catch a pike, you can throw a deep diving crankbait or a jig worm. Caught a lot on that, or you can go out there and get some sucker minnows and do that as well. So a lot of pike are chowing. Didn't really fish for any walleyes. It's been mostly bass and some panfish for us, and that's how I plan to hit the water again this week. So we'll spend some more time on the water this week. We're gonna have some storms roll through tonight, they're saying. We'll see what this does to the bite, if anything. And then we got some stable weather, and I think we got to warm up next weekend in the 90s, which should happen in mid-July. So don't get scared. That's kind of what we expect here. So just pay attention to the skies this week. Looks like we could have some fun weather rolling through. Continue to protect your body and your skin with these Blackfish sun shirts. Bring lots of water on the boat. Have a whole lot of fun, and continue to enjoy your summer pattern bite here in mid-July. Get out there, catch some fish, and we'll catch you next time.